Welcome to Tool Hut channel. Today we have more of an educational type video. We have a 2018 Silverado. The shop has condemned the computer. It didn't fix the vehicle, and I thought it would be a good time to go over some practices that'll keep you from making this mistake. Stand by. While you got a second, why don't you go ahead and click that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell if you want to be notified when stuff comes out. I welcome any questions or comments you may have down below. Okay, first things first. Any of the equipment that you see used in my videos is available on the website. If it's not there, send me an inquiry off the website, toolhutusa.com. That's TOOLHUT USA.com. My name is Sam. Okay, so let's get into this a little bit here. So let me give you a little backstory. This vehicle was at a transmission shop. The shop had just replaced the transmission with a remanufactured unit. I'm not real sure why they went that route, but it's irregardless at this point. The vehicle pulled in on it under its own power. It would not leave the shop. They called me. I explained to them to check the grounds anywhere that they had pulled the trans, thinking maybe they had disturbed a ground line or something like that. I did not have time to diagnose this vehicle myself. I will tell you that I did work on it a little bit, and I didn't get any real good direction. But I did get information from the shop, what the other shop found when they discovered it. So I thought I would just go over some basic principles, stuff that a lot of shops miss. Now, there's no fault to this transmission shop. They did what they knew what to do, and then they outsourced it somewhere else. So I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm just trying to keep somebody else from having this same mistake. So let's get into this a little bit. It's 2018 Silverado. It does have the 6-speed transmission in it, 5.3 with a 6-speed transmission in it. And let's look at some computer data lines on ALLDATA, and let's just see what we got. Okay, before we get into the computer data lines, let's go over some basic tests that you should be doing anytime you have a vehicle that doesn't communicate. These are actually, before you condemn any computer, it doesn't have to be no communication, just you're getting ready to put a computer in it. So what should we be looking for? I don't care if it does communicate. You need to check all powers and grounds with a loaded test slate at the connector, at the PCM. It has to have the ability to communicate. Now, obviously, if this is not a communication problem, you don't necessarily need to scope the communication lines, but you should be looking at voltages on the communication lines anyway. And then the reference voltage wires, I see this all the time where a 5-volt reference sensor is pulled to ground and is causing the PCM not to communicate, or the ECM, or the TCM, or whatever. You have to make sure you're not pulled to ground. And then the other big misstep a lot of shops do is if it's a no communication, you need to look and see where the communication lines are coming from, and does the module before it in the diagram communicate. So let's go over that, because this is what's wrong with this car or the vehicle. So hold on a minute, let's get over there. Okay, so we got our 2018 Silverado pull up here on ALLDATA, and I have gone to the non-OE diagrams. I prefer the OEs, but we're going to do both. We're going to just go over it. I'm going to get on here to information bus. We're going to go to computer data lines. I'm just going to click this zoom and print. I don't like to have multiple pages, so I know that the diagram I'm looking for, because I've been here and looked already, is on the last page. So we're just going to zoom in to the information that we're looking for. So like I said, this is a 6-speed transmission. And then here's the engine control module. So the interesting thing is that this transmission control module communicates just fine. This is the replacement transmission control module that's in here. we can communicate with it just fine, but I can't communicate with the engine control module. So what could possibly be wrong here? So let's look here. So what we've got, and I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but this tells me that the computer data lines are coming from another module. Now I could scan over here and see what they're coming from. It's just going to take me on a long path. I don't really care. The fact is, the transmission control module communicates just fine, but the engine control module doesn't communicate. So I can't just unplug this transmission control module because these data lines come from another module. They go to the transmission control module, and then the transmission control module sends these data lines out to the engine control module. So it's like a series connection. So my Christmas light here has to work before my Christmas tree light can work here. Hopefully that makes sense. So what is wrong is this transmission control module that they have installed that communicates just fine, by the way, is broken inside. It's not sending these computer data lines to the engine control module. The shop had thought they had messed up, done something, damaged the engine control module. It's not the fault of the transmission shop. They're not electrical diagnostics guys. They did send it to a shop. I was not involved in the diagnosis, but I did talk to them about what happened, how they got it diagnosed, and I just thought I'd go over it with you. I will tell you that I did have the transmission shop pull the engine control module out of it, and I could communicate with it just fine on the bench. So if I can communicate with it just fine on the bench, that tells me there's nothing wrong with that engine control module. So my suspicion was that they had blown a fuse for the engine control module because the transmission control module communicated, right? So logically, this module's good, this module's bad, right? Not necessarily. This module was not sending the data to this module. Hopefully that makes sense. It ended up, what they did was they unplugged the transmission, and then they jumpered these wires. They jumped the white to the white and the blue to the blue, and then the engine control module communicates just fine. It still wouldn't start because it needed neutral reference from the transmission control module. But I just thought it was interesting that here's a golden example of what you need to look for when you're doing these no communications. Now, I understand that this isn't a typical vehicle, but with all these aftermarket and offshore transmission control modules that are getting put in these vehicles, I think we're going to see more and more of this. These are garbage modules. A lot of times they fail during programming, and I just thought I would help somebody, help them determine what's wrong with this vehicle. So if I would have had time to diagnose this properly, the easiest thing to do is just unplug the transmission control module, run 2 jumper wires, and see if the engine control module communicates. If it does, then there's something wrong with the transmission control module internally, and that's in the transmission. So you can figure out what you're going to do with it from there. And because this was a transmission assembly that they had replaced, I'm not real sure if they just put another module in it or if the transmission rebuilder sent them another module. I don't know the scenario. All I know is that the transmission control module was the culprit keeping my engine control module from not communicating. So hope that helps somebody. Interesting situation, I thought. We all know these dash lines mean there's more to this computer, right? There's more to these wires. So all I'm looking at is the computer data lines. And just for reference, here's the computer data lines on the OE side. It's this K71 transmission control module. It's the M5U transmission. So the computer data lines come up through here. They go through the transmission control module. And see here, you can see that it's coming from a junction block in the instrument panel, and it goes through the transfer case. So if the transfer case communicated and the transmission didn't, I would have went at this a different way. There's a couple of connectors. There's a X115, goes through this junction block, instrument panel, transfer case, and the best way I can tell you how my mentality is on these is I call these a series connection. I know there's proper terminology for them, but it has to go from this data link connector through the junction box to the transfer case control module. So if the transfer case control module communicated and the transmission didn't, like I said, you're going to look at this a different way. But since the transmission communicated and the engine didn't, this is where I started. So hope that helps somebody. Have a great day. Questions, comments down below. Like I say, keep them clean or I delete them. Have a great day.